And welcome to TBR's webinar, Just How Big is the Telecom Infrastructure Services Market Opportunity? Market Insights from TBR's Global Addressable Market Forecast. My name is Allison Crawford, and I'll be your host for today's session. Focus is to provide business research to accelerate our customer success, and the information we'll be covering today comes directly from our TIS Addressable Market Forecast report. This report includes information on geographic growth, services segments, vendor market share, and more. This information from our networking and mobility team delivers will be valuable to any firm with plans to expand their footprint or compete more effectively in the global TIS market. We'll present some of our findings to you and feedback on our information. Before I hand this over to Chris, there are a few action items I'd like to cover with you. We will be recording today's session and posting it to the TBR YouTube channel. I encourage you to visit this channel to watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Share your opinions and thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Put any questions or comments through the Q&A function or the chat function. Chris will address them at the end of the presentation. We will send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. Now, let me introduce Chris Antlitz and the networking and mobility team here at TBR. Chris is covering the telecom infrastructure services market for the last 5 years and gather research on our TIS benchmark. Insight into operators and their competitive strategies have helped our clients improve their strategic go-to-market plans and improve their performance. Let me hand this over to Chris.
Thanks, welcome everyone. Next, $2 billion and growing. That's the size of the global telecom infrastructure services market. We use the acronym TIS. TIS includes deployment, maintenance, and managed services provided on telecom equipment and software such as RAN, core, and like OSS, BSS on the software end. And there are 3 key drivers that we see over the next 5 years that is fueling this revenue growth. First is LTE deployments. Second is OSS BSS transformation. And third is customer experience management. Now, 3 are underlying themes that we're going to see through this forecast that operators globally are going to have to deal with to remain relevant in the industry. Next slide, please. LTE. We LTE peaking in the 2013 to 2014 frame. We operate in North America and in countries like Japan and South Korea really get a head start on getting these LTE networks deployed. And they have been a key driver in 2010, 2011, and now in 2012, ramping up the deployment. Deployment in general, and this goes for all operators, starts in urban markets, overlaying it on top of a 3G network or a 2G network in some cases. And they are gradually going to expand that out to rural areas. We, in the years of the forecast, countries like China and India will jump in, deploy their own LTE networks. We'll get into a little bit more about that later. The 3 key trends, LTE, OSS, BSS, and CEM, are going to drive not only deployment, maintenance services, but also professional and managed services. It's really a wave that's going to seep into all of these service categories and redrive revenue for many reasons, which we're going to get into in a second. Next slide, please. So let's take traditional services, for example. Now, professional services, people think traditional consulting and systems integration. While yes, that is a primary component of professional services in TIS, there are also things like security, training, plan optimization, and there's also application-oriented services provided that are considered a professional service in the industry. So things going on in professional services. First and most, at the beginning of the forecast, we see design planning, consulting, innovation work being key drivers of revenue. That's primarily because operators are at the very stages of really ramping up their LTE deployments. And consulting and the planning and design all occurs before the actual network is deployed. So that investment is going to be made in the early years, between 2011 and 2013 is the bulk of it. In the middle years, we're going to see a shift towards integration focus, where once the equipment now starts to get deployed, the vendors are going to be integrating it on behalf of the operators. So if you have multi-mode RAN, if you're going multi-mode RAN and getting rid of your existing 2G, 3G base stations to consolidate, would be part of the integration process. There's applications integration where with OSS, BSS, and CEM, which are going to drive growth in professional services. OSS, BSS transformation, what that means is basically overhaul existing billing systems and network management systems optimized for data. Right now, in most cases, operators are using legacy systems that for voice, no data. But now the tree is transforming from a voice-centric to a data-centric business model. Those systems need to be to align with that new business model. We see the investment really starting to pick up steam in 2013 to 2015 timeframe, where more operators are going to have to make that critical investment. Please. So the regions, LTE is the major theme that we are going to see in all regions at different deployment schedules. So Americas and parts of APAC are well ahead of their LTE rollouts, and then countries, regions like India and China, who are a little bit slower getting their LTE deployed, and we'll ramp up in the later years of the forecast. And then in there will be a mix of USS, BSS, and customer experience management will be in there too. Now we're focusing on 3 areas, but keep in mind there's also other underlying things that are driving revenue in this market. It's not just those 3, but those 3 are the overarching global-based themes that are driving this growth. Please. A little bit about North America. We, AT&T and Verizon, have been very aggressive with LTE deployments. We have also seen some operators in Canada, CE and TELUS, be aggressive with their LTE deployments. Sprint's network vision, where Sprint is taking network, refine spectrum, and putting it to their CDMA network to expand coverage and capacity. Sprint also, while they're doing network vision, is ripping out their base stations and replacing it with multi-mode base stations that are optimized for not only CDMA but also LTE. So basically going to be able to route both traffic through those base stations. That's not only going to save money, it's also going to improve coverage and the capacity on their network and improve the overall user experience. CALA is another story. We've seen operators in CALA be very aggressive as well with their CapEx for LTE as well as fixed access deployment, so fixed broadband. Most is in urban areas, but the government pushes in several countries like Chile and Brazil to really branch out that infrastructure build out and get more of their citizens access to that technology. Really big push behind that. We see in CALA, LTE will really start ramping up in later this year and through 2013. So ahead of other emerging markets, India and China and India, they're ahead of the game. Next slide, please. So Europe. Let's talk about Europe first. Modernizations. So that was a big story in 2011. What was Ericsson had identified about 2 years ago that there were 1.5 million base stations in Europe that were grandfathered in essentially. And there were 2G and 3G base stations. Operators are doing in preparation for LTE deployment. They decided it was cost effective to rip out those old base stations and replace them with the multi-mode base stations. That's them on OpEx as well as CapEx, because they don't have to deploy as many base stations and they don't have to maintain as many, because consolidating it into one unit. The 3G build still going. There's coverage expansion. In the East, we're seeing more densification. There is a big pine small cell, so Y as well as femto cells. We're seeing operators there being open to deploying those solutions. And in Europe, operators in cities in particular, where the data is just so high and so taxing on the networks. Doing by offload has a very strong economic benefit for the operators to leverage. It's a mixed bag. We see Japan, South Korea have taken lead. Countries tend to be at the forefront of wireless technology. The operators in those two countries tend to be first adopters, and they take when they network, they are rolling it out very quickly, and they do it with cutting-edge technology. They are the first testers of new technology, and they were some of the first operators who were in those countries who actually went with LTE. So in the years, the South Pan will start tapering off in LTE spend in the 2012-13 timeframe. There's also billing network management systems that need to be overhauled as well. And there's the densification. They have high populations in those countries, and things like Wi-Fi and using femtels in conjunction with their macro stations be huge. They're going to need to do it. They already are doing it. They need to do that because the data traffic in those countries, the smartphone penetration in Korea alone exceeds 80%. There's developed wireless markets in those two countries. And then in the later years of the forecast, China and India are the big story. They are an interesting case. There's some red tape in that country regards to telecom rolling out those networks, as we saw with 3G, and now there's a revocation of the 2G licenses. That's really creating a stir in the industry in that country. So, settles, which we feel is going to be another few years, then maybe we'll start seeing the LTE licenses be issued, and we'll build out then in the later years of the forecast. China has been delaying their handing out their TD-LTE licenses to Unicom and Telecom respectively, and so we don't see those licenses being issued for another few years. And while those operators will start quickly ramping up that deployment. Next slide. A little about the vendors that make up this industry and the market share that they had in 2011. Ericsson, Nokia, Siemens, and Alcatel-Lucent, the big three European incumbents, they control about a third of the market, a little over a third of the market. The CNSI space and application space, you have IBM and HP, who are dominant forces. Huawei by them, and is really making strides in the market. They care about it selling equipment more than the services. They offer the services to sell the equipment, because their model is mass produce the equipment in China, export it to other markets, and they grow in services to sell equipment and penetrate new accounts, because they're in penetrate mode right now. And number one priority is grow market share. And there are firms like Accenture, who's very strong in consulting and systems integration, in the OSS BSS space, Cisco, call, and Oracle in the application side of the business as well make up a commanding share of this market. Next. OSS BSS and customer experience management. Those three themes that we see that are going to be the prime drivers of TIS going forward. Next slide, please. So how do we get to this conclusions? This is a question that we're asked. So we go about this several ways. We do a top-down and bottoms-up analysis of each of the major Tier 1 and Tier 2 TIS suppliers, everyone from the Ericssons of the world to the smaller players like American Tower and Wipro and some of those small firms. We track all of them. We have models on them where we break out their services revenue across the different services segments. We have portfolio analysis and margin analysis and geographic analysis based on reported deals that they have and other that's in the marketplace. We have publicly reported documents as a point for models, and we also have a primary component here. So we do extensive interviews, conversations with these suppliers and operators to identify what are the key growth trends and why. Why is it going to happen? What drivers? What kind of growth can we expect? And with this view, and this allows, by having this deep knowledge base, we're able to make these conclusions and market level data. Next slide, please. The companies that we cover the 38 largest TIS suppliers globally, like the usual suspects like Alcatel-Lucent, HP, also some smaller companies like Samsung and SAP, ZTE. All other ones and nearly all of the Tier 2s we have covered, and we have extensive models and a lot of ongoing conversations with these companies. Over to Allison.
And thanks for everyone who's sent in the questions so far. Before we open up the floor and get your questions in front of Chris, I just share some additional information on the report that Chris has been referencing during this webcast. If they're interested in getting access to this report or any of the other ones that are mentioned on the slide, you can reach Chris directly or to our VP of Sales, whose contact information will be on the next slide. So our first question that's come in is, why will Huawei gain market share in TIS at the expense of incumbents over the next few years? What is their TIS strategy?
Huawei, again, equipment. Something to pull through equipment sales. They get better margins on equipment than do on the services. And as typical in the industry, something like deployment services is usually a loss leader. Vendor will offer that they'll offer the deployment services at a loss in order to sell the equipment. And on the overall contract, they get a decent margin on that. That's the Huawei's taking right now that they're in penetrate mode. We're also Huawei being more dominant force in maintenance and managed services, a lot less so in professional services. Huawei very weak in professional services. Managed services, they are rapidly, they're investing in their global service delivery network, which includes network operation centers, and they're doing a lot of on-site and remote technical support, as well as managed network operations, as out-tasking or select outsourcing. While we're getting into cloud and some other types of services, and they're also growing is because they are more worried about the equipment. They will offer the services at a lower margin and they can undercut some of the other vendors on price, and that's helping spur some of these market share gains for them.
Excellent. The next question that's come in is, why will operators finally bite the bullet and transform their OSS BSS systems? Then talk of this investment cycle beginning several years ago, but it never materialized.
So So look at the technologies. So you have, which is a voice-optimized technology. Then you had 3G come out. So some HSPA does voice and data. It can process both types of packets. You have 4G, which is data only. Voice is an application, so VoLTE. Voice over IP is an application over that data network. So operators didn't really have to race those existing systems because the networks that they had could handle the data. But don't underestimate how big the data would become and how fast the smartphone be in global markets. What happened is those systems are not equipped and they're not optimized to handle the data influx that they have gotten, nor are they equipped to efficiently handle new resources. So, for instance, like buying an application from your smartphone. The systems do it very inefficiently right now if you're doing it through a smartphone. And if they can rip and replace those systems with new systems that are optimized for data, they will be able to save money and be able to offer these new revenue streams to their customers. LTE builds, while LTE is over on existing networks, the operators feel are going to be prioritizing OSS/BSS as the next big investment area. Because once those data networks are in place, then it makes sense from an operational and CapEx standpoint to transfer those systems over. Now, these are major projects. These are transformational back office projects that we're talking here. That requires, millions of dollars for a tier one operator like AT&T or, a Vodafone. I mean, the big investments, and they're involved because these are billing systems or management systems. There needs to be a seamless off. And the operator, there's going to be professional services that are needed, consulting, a lot of planning and design to do this transition. That's going to come after the LTE wave.
Okay. The last question we've had come in, how was Ericsson's acquisition of Telcordia change the competitive landscape in OSS/BSS, and why will the company be successful?
Before Telcordia, Ericsson had a relatively weak communications portfolio. They do some in TV, do some in revenue management. The action of Telcordia is Ericsson identifying that OSS/BSS is going to be a major investment trend over the next few years, because Telcordia is a major player in that market. They're firmly entrenched with many tier one operators, particularly in the U.S. By blending Ericsson's existing portfolio with Telcordia's portfolio, as well as the services expertise, because Telcordia is also very strong in DIS on the software portion, the integration of OSS/BSS systems, very strong there. So by blending those two portfolios, Ericsson, we feel, has an industry-leading portfolio now. Doing some analysis around both of the portfolios that they had separately, and then the blending of both of them as a customer base that Ericsson has gotten that they can now leverage. Ericsson's a big player here, and they are going to be a major beneficiary of this investment trend over the next few years. We've also seen in some other consolidation in this space. A few months ago, we saw NEC buy the billing system of Convergys, a TIS supplier. And that's another move where a firm has identified and given credibility to the fact that, yes, in fact, OSS/BSS is an investment area going forward. And the big firms are really positioning our position as we speak. So, any other questions?
Okay. Put that out there. For anyone has any last-minute questions, I'd like to encourage you all to follow Chris. He's one of our most active analysts on Twitter. You can see his Twitter handle here. A couple people have actually written to find out if we are sending the slides out. We'll be sending the slides out to everyone who attended within 24 hours. I'd like to encourage anyone who has any questions, because I realize there were a lot of numbers and data in Chris's presentation. If you would like to set up a inquiry with Chris, a half-hour inquiry after you get the slides and have any questions, please feel free to either reach out to Chris or James directly to set up that conversation. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today, and we look forward to the continuing conversation. I will leave the chat function open for another couple minutes or so in case there's any last-minute questions. Otherwise, we look forward to continuing the dialogue, and have a good afternoon, everyone.